Welcome to the Difference Project, everyone. An exploration at how to use difference to make a difference. And in this first season, how to use the diversity of thought and ideas that comes from different backgrounds, perspectives, and lived human experience to diversify the future of work. But if we're going to create a workplace of the future, then as Stephen Covey says, we need to begin with the end in mind. We need to understand our destination if we have any hope of embarking on the right sort of journey. So in this first episode, we want to talk about what sort of workplace the future actually requires. But oftentimes when we have a conversation about the future in a business context, it's focused on growth, the markets we want to enter, the products and services that we want to offer, and of course, the financial gains that grow with those offerings. The workplace, the way that our teams and people interact, are often a byproduct of that pursuit, rather than the foundation on which it's built. But what if we started with the way the workplace works? We started with creating an environment where we got the very best of our people and brought those people together to create the very best of our organizations. Wouldn't it be great if engagement and inclusion wasn't an HR problem that you were trying to solve, but instead was the force that brought your organization's diversity of thought, skills, and experience together to create exceptional products and delighted clients? Wouldn't it be amazing if when the next wave of disruption or uncertainty hits, you had designed a workplace that could respond in positive and resilient ways? But look, I get it. A discussion about the future is tough these days. You might very well be thinking, I don't even know what's going to happen next week. How am I going to see into the future? Well, I reckon understanding what sort of workplace will help us to take on the future is less about predicting that future than it is about understanding the forces that will shape it. So we'd like to encourage you to share your thoughts in the chat about what sort of circumstances and influence you see in your industry or the business environment at large. Please share your questions, concerns, insights, so that we might shape a workplace that responds to those sorts of forces, that shapes a better future. But without further ado, let's introduce our panel. So I'll start with my co-host, producer, and co-conspirator, Mike Emmett. Welcome, Mike.
Hi, Jeff. It's nice to be back here on the Difference Project. It's we had such a great time, putting together the pilot that we thought let's have another crack at this because it's there's so much to talk about here, and like every time you and I get together, we think and we talk. What are we going to do in the run of this show? We always say at the end, wow, that could have been a 2-hour podcast, just us talking about it. So you know what, there's so much to cover here. It's really interesting for me from my perspective, working for larger organizations as an outsider, to actually be engaging with this on my level as much as it is to listen to it from a corporate level, because there's so much for me to learn. So yeah, thanks for having me back, Jeff.
Oh, my pleasure. In fact, I think it goes without saying we couldn't do it without you, actually. Look, before we jump into the conversation, how about we pay our respects to the traditional owners of the land that we have the privilege to bring this show, that you and I have the privilege to bring this show.
Sure. It's really important that we do that. It's kind of a tradition here in Australia that, well, it absolutely is a tradition, but it's also very much part of our reconciliation process here in Australia, that we acknowledge the traditional owners on the country that we come to from today. And for Jeffrey and I, that's the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations. We pay respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging.
Cool. Excellent. So Mike, anything particular that you're looking for from this episode that you want to start us off with, share with the audience?
Yeah, great. Well, really good question. It's been, I'm really, really interested at the moment in thinking about how we think about work and the workplace beyond, like we've been obsessed for the last 18 months, 2 years with the rapid changes in the workplace because of a particular thing, and if we're going to name the elephant in the room, it's a pandemic, right? So we've been kind of obsessed with talking about that, but at the moment I'm really more interested in what was happening before that and what's going to happen after it, and thinking that there was already a great move underway, there's a great kind of dissemination of the workplace in the physical sense, but also there's that kind of diaspora away from the offices has really drawn forth a few issues that I think bear talking about with regards to the future of the workplace. So I'm super interested in that today, Jeff.
Cool, excellent. Thanks, Mike. Well, now let's introduce our guest panelists, and we'll start with Kim Seeling Smith. She is the CEO and founder of Ignite Global and a future of work expert who helps organizations move from disruptible to indestructible in the post-pandemic world. So, hi, Kim, and welcome to the Difference Project.
Thank you so much. I'm really, really pleased to be here. Such an important and exciting topic. I can't wait to get going.
Cool. So I'm curious, much of your work is helping organizations to build, sustain, and retain their workforce through a future of work lens. And yes. I guess to extend that metaphor, probably badly, Michael, tell me, what sort of aperture are you looking through at the moment? What are you focusing on in the world that we're existing currently?
Well, right now I'm focusing on the Great Resignation. And this is really fascinating because this is a crisis that we've seen coming. If you go back, McKinsey coined the term war for talent back in 1997. Now, the Great Resignation is all about people quitting voluntarily, but people are only quitting voluntarily because they understand that there are more jobs than people, and they feel secure that if they quit, they'll be able to secure another job. So this is not a new phenomenon. And the organizations that think that it is COVID related, I would hesitate. I would pull them back and say, remember, we have seen this building over the last 20 years. We've known about this skills shortage. We're just in a perfect storm of a skills shortage happening at the same time that because of the pandemic, because of COVID, we've had the opportunity, we've been forced to sit back and to reflect on what it is that we really want. And we've realized that life is too short not to have a job and career that we absolutely love. So you put those two together, people are starting to vote with their feet. So that's what I'm spending a lot of time talking about right now.
Cool. And we'll hopefully get a chance to talk some more about that as we go through the show over the next 50 or so minutes. Thank you very much, Kim. And to our next panelist, Dr. Gena Cox is an organizational psychologist and founder of Feels Human, Inc., and author of the upcoming book, Get It If You Dare, Leading Inclusion. And for 20 years, she's advised and coached Fortune 500 leaders on how to build more inclusively healthy organizations and how to optimize their leadership impact. So good evening, Gena. See what I did there? And welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Evening indeed, because I am in Florida in the United States. Yay! And happy to be here. And so delighted to be talking about this particular topic because, I have advised leaders for over 30 years that the characteristic of the work environment that really makes the difference is the behavior of managers. And most leaders have sort of underemphasized this whole idea. And we see that, we'll talk about this more in the conversation. But at this point in time, I'm helping leaders to really understand their particular role in defining the kinds of work cultures that will create, the psychological safety that is necessary for inclusion. And I'm also trying to help them understand that I don't use the term the Great Resignation because I really think that what many people are leaving is they're leaving those weak leaders who have not provided them with what they've needed in their work environments for all these years. So I hope we'll have a wonderful conversation as we think about these issues from a variety of angles.
Cool. Excellent. Thank you, Gena. And last but certainly not least, Anneli Blundell. As a professional people whisperer, author, and speaker, Anneli is known for creating safe spaces to explore the issues and opportunities of inclusion, belonging, and allyship in practical and profound ways. She is also, and I had a drum roll for you, the 2021 Gold Stevie Award winner for Women in Business. So welcome, Anneli, and congratulations.
Thank you so much. It's so nice when someone toots your own horn. Isn't that fabulous? Thanks, Jeff.
Put down my horn.
Thank you so much. Shout out to you for doing that. I appreciate that. Look, delighted to be here second time round. I love this kind of conversation because it's about creating space for the new, and we often don't take enough time to reflect because we're so busy running that we don't proactively and deliberately create and in fact co-create what is now possible. And I think this great resignation and this pause and our profound opportunity to reflect given the pandemic situation is enabling us to really think about what we want. So from my perspective, I'm on a mission to humanize the leadership landscape. So for me, this is about understanding what works for us as humans. A lot of my work is around communication, connection, helping people collaborate and work together and get the best out of each other. So for me, I'm seeing a real emphasis on human skills. When you talk about, the forces that are shaping our future, I love that idea. Not what's happening, what's going to come in the future. Let's not bother predicting. Let's go with what's already occurring because we are being shaped. So let's do that in more deliberate ways. So I'm really excited about this conversation coming.
Cool. Oh, there's so much in this, I think. One of the things that struck me is much of the conversation around the future of work for most of the last decade had a real technology bent. With big data, AI, robots, a jobless economy. And all of a sudden, when the pandemic hit, it's a very human-centric crisis. And as a result, a lot of the conversations that are starting to happen around the future of work are very human-focused. So, how can we be more resilient? Well, robots don't need to be resilient. How can we be more adaptable? And AI is only adaptable in how effectively we humans are able to program it. All those sorts of human discussions are now flowing out of a crisis that was fundamentally a human crisis because everything else was still working. Excellent. So, Mike, you want to kick us off with some questions, my producer friend?
Sure, Jeff. We have a bunch of questions in today, but the first up, if we're talking about the workplace of the future, what do we even mean by the workplace?
There we go. I have some ideas on this, but I'll hand it over to someone who wants to take on, because I think there's for a long time the workplace was all about a physical location, but there's an oxymoron in that because we talk about workplace culture. Well, buildings and job sites and manufacturing facilities don't have culture; people do. So, what's Kim? What's your definition of?
I was going to say, I'll jump in because the real answer is we don't know. We're figuring this out. And anybody who thinks they do know is lying, quite frankly. We're figuring this out as we go. What we do know is that what we're seeing now is that COVID accelerated a trend that had already been developing. People want to work from home part of the time, work in their office part of the time, and that has just accelerated. We had the greatest work from home experiment in the world, and we proved that we could do it. So currently, right now, on this very day, what we know is that people want choice. People want to go to the physical workspace to do some types of work and work from home to do some types of work. And how companies are figuring that out varies wildly. But I suspect that we're going to start to hear about two types of productivity. The type of productivity that we have when we interact with people, and we do that in the workplace mostly, and then on Zoom, on Teams, on Slack, whatever your communications channel is as a backup. And then we have the get the work out the door. And we tend to want to do that at home or at a cafe, someplace where we don't need to be interrupted. So currently, what the workplace looks like is a physical environment to bring people together. And the smart companies are really looking at it as that. But a workplace is also the connection between individuals who work together to solve a problem, to overcome a challenge, to seize an opportunity. And how that shapes out over time, I think we're going to go in swings and roundabouts. I think we're going to see different experiments until something really grabs hold and moves us forward into the next normal.
The newest new normal.
The newest new normal, exactly right.
That's right.
Yeah, I really agree with Kim that we don't know what we don't know. We just don't know what's going to happen. And even any assumptions we make about the fact that we're X number of months into the pandemic and we're starting to see what we think are patterns that will carry forward, in the period 2 years from now or a year and a half from now, we're probably going to be making many more mistakes. So this is a period where I think it's all about paying attention, experimenting, and learning with, in fact, I tell leaders, if you want to try things and you're talking to employees to try to understand what they want and what they need, which you should be doing, then whatever you try, sort of frame it as an experiment, a trial, because my sense is that 6 months from now, things will be different. And then another 6 months from now, some things will be different. And it's just like at the beginning of the pandemic, when we were pretty sure, us humans, based on the things that we had known from previous crises or disruptions, we were like, oh yeah, we'll do this, we'll do that, and then in 6 months it's going to be over, blah, blah, blah. And we kind of tried to predict our way into normalcy at the beginning of the pandemic. And then somewhere along the line, we figured out, first of all, the pandemic is going on longer than we thought. People are not reacting in the ways that we thought that they would. We thought they would be coming back to the office sooner. And then all of a sudden, this whole thing about, what is my purpose on this planet became a big issue that leaders can't manage, because how can you tell me what my purpose is on the planet? You can tell me what my job is, but you can't tell me what my purpose is. So I agree with Kim that this is a period of time where what we ought to do is, if we want to be effective leaders, is to sort of allow ourselves to be in that moment and not try to control things that we can't really control or predict that we can't control or predict. Now, the other thing I would say is that even when we talk about workplace, I almost feel like we need to take a step back from that, because the other thing that I'm observing is that, and I feel my sense from talking to employees and leaders about this is that employees are ahead of leaders with regard to some of their exploration of these issues. Let me explain what I'm about to say. Employees are, I think, even asking, well, what is work? What is work for? What is the purpose of it? What's the value of it? How should I think about it? Why should I care about it? Should it continue to be my number one priority? So before we can even talk about workplace and connection and collaboration and innovation and creativity, I think that there's a lot that we won't know, because employees are going to be sort of defining work, not just the tasks, but the value, the purpose, the meaning of it. A very exciting time. I'm glad I'm not a CEO. They've never had easy jobs, and just tremendously challenging time.
I want to pick up on that just really, really quickly, if I could. One of the things that I talk about is the 5 trends that leaders need to embrace to win the future of work. And what you said is so incredibly important: experimenting, because one of those 5 trends is the ability to make decisions given information that is either incomplete or overwhelming or conflicting, and then being able to change your mind, to pivot when that's proven to be incorrect, and to take people along with you on that journey. So I think experimentation and being able to say, the Adam Grant thing, what, I got it wrong. That we tried that, great job, and now we're going to do something else, and here's why. Taking them on the journey. I think it's going to be a big ask for a lot of leaders to be able to do that, but so very necessary. So I love your terminology around that.
And I would add, from a personal perspective here, with my humanizing the landscape lens, I think about myself in this particular journey. So I've been working for myself for 15 years, and I came out of the corporate space, and it took, a good 10 years before I let myself shop in the middle of the day, because that's not work hours, right? I've been so indoctrinated that you work during set work times, not when you feel good, not when you feel energetic, not when it suits you, and a night owl or a morning lark or whatever it is, but during the designated hours. It has literally taken me this time to not only start to notice what works for me as an individual, but to give myself permission. If I want to sleep in on a weekday, heaven forbid, don't tell anyone, because I don't have clients and I need some more rest, I will take that rest. If I want to lay in my bed with my iPad and do work, if I want to sit out in the sun deck, and listen to a podcast or something, that's considered work. But that is like heresy in the corporate space. You can't work like that. So when we talk about this experiment, it's not just leaders and their employees, it's us as individuals giving ourselves permission to say, what is work for me? How do I best do my work? And what if it isn't within the regular 9 to 5? Am I going to allow that to be okay for me enough that I want to put that on the agenda and say, hey, I work best from 10 till 7. How is that cool? Let's talk about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's very interesting. And I just want to add one comment, which I want to add to every conversation of this sort. And that is that the things that you were just describing are so familiar. And we all are sort of, knowledge workers with this luxury of asynchronously thinking and doing and learning and sharing. And, that's what we do. But I'm thinking about the truck drivers. I'm thinking about the IATSE union workers in the United States who have gone on strike because they make fantastic movies that make billions of dollars. But we discovered that they weren't getting breaks. They were working crazy hours in 2021. We discovered that, they're basically being treated like, not like professionals, not like the professionals that they are. And it's really interesting because I don't know, and I'm not trying to predict, but I'm really interested to see whether, sort of like, will it be the people that traditionally have been at the bottom of the pile, who haven't been given that freedom and to do things in different ways or to have any flexibility? Will they be the ones who will be having a disproportionate impact on defining the future of what work is, what it means, workplace, and all those other things? Because I've been talking to people where, for example, let's say you work on, you have what we would often call a blue collar job, a job where it's about production, using your hands or whatever. And what if then, you work in an organization where some other proportion of the population are these thought workers? Well, is one group superior than the other? No. And then, well, how come only one group gets that flexibility? How come you only assume that one group, it's easy for this one group to get the flexibility? And what if I'm in this other group that has never had the flexibility but desires flexibility? And what if there happen to be a very large number, like in this union? Well, what do you do? This is a period of time where, again, back to these fundamental ideas of the value of work, who has the power. Everything is sort of being shaken at the roots. And it's because, I think, and it's the reason I don't like to use the expression, the Great Resignation, it's because it's more a matter of people being honest with themselves, with their managers, and with the world about the realities of the work environments in which they've been operating silently, without complaining for so long.
Forbes, I read an article in Forbes yesterday, I'm not sure when it was published, but recently, that is actually starting to call it the Great Revolution. And they cited all of the worker unrest, all of the strikes that are happening, some of which, because being an American living in Australia, I read the news from really all over the world. And some of the news about the strikes isn't even being reported. One of my clients is a training organization. that specializes in the food processing manufacturing companies. And they have a global client base. I caught up with her yesterday and she said, you would not believe how many of our customers have people out on strike now, and how many more are talking about that. So I think that that's a really, really interesting point, is who's going to be driving it? How is it going to, because people are demanding to be treated equally. People are demanding to be treated as individuals and treated equally. And I think that that's the common theme, because if you look at different research studies, you get wildly different results. Because, and I think that that's kind of the point, because the future of work is human, but it's also individual. And so we are going to see these groups of people like unions, like union representatives, reshaping. And there are companies that are figuring it out. There's a property company here in Australia that has a completely flexible work arrangement, even for their tradies who, build the property. So it is, we are able to figure it out. We just need to think differently about it.
Yeah. One of the things, and an example in that world, in my background is working across different types of workforces, if you will. So blue collar, professional, and administrative, all working together on construction projects. And there is a vast disparity in the expectations around how much you work, how you get compensated, how you feel about how much you work and how you get compensated. And that melting pot has been mixed up because suddenly that world changed. Okay, now the construction engineers that were expected to work six days a week, 12 hours a day, that's not happening because you're homeschooling, you're away from the job site, whereas the construction workers that had to physically be there in a location to do the work that they do, there was still much more structure and rigor around it. Administrative roles were thrown in the air because we're homeschooling, but we're also we don't have access to the sort of things that allow us to do what we want to do. And on top of that, you're starting to see executives in different areas of the construction industry. They're saying, hold on a second, this whole work on Saturday thing has a profound impact on family life. And it limits the ability of women to actually be in this industry because suddenly they need some of that flexibility to be able to provide, to do the carer role that is traditionally fallen to them. But not only that, we now have male engineers who want to be a part of their children's life. So, we're starting to see one of the big forces, I think, like as everybody's saying here, is that kind of, what does work look like for me? And do I want to play in that world? And the opportunity on the other side, the revolutionary opportunity, if you will, is to see that and start to shape your workplace. And by workplace, I often think of it more energetically. It's the physical parts are the trappings, if you will, but it's more, how do you actually get your people interacting together? And that's can be virtual, it can be physical, it can be a combination of the two, but how do people come together and what sort of conversations do they have? So, Mike, we probably should, since we've got one question under our belt, do you have something else for us?
Sure. So the next question that you guys have answered maybe 3 or 4 of the questions we had in the queue today, but which is great. So scrolling down a little, change seems to be getting faster and the impacts are bigger. Is that a big part of what our future workplace needs to be able to handle? Jeffrey.
Look, and once again, I have some pretty strong views on this because it's sort of my world, but I think there's change from 2 different perspectives. And we've actually talked a lot about one change. There are the change that are expected of our businesses. And then there are the changes that our businesses need to respond to if they're going to meet the expectations of their investors, shareholders, and customers. And I don't think the big change is the pandemic. I think the pandemic is actually just a big exclamation point on the sort of change that the future workplace and the future of work will need to respond to, because we're so heavily connected, because we're a global economy. When major disruptions happen, they reach much further places, and even within organizations, it's when email came along, it was a huge disruptive force, but it didn't fundamentally change the way you did work. Whereas we're now starting to see forces coming into the marketplace from unseen locations that have profound impacts across your entire business, and as well as industries. Kim, I see you nodding. What
the change. So I was on a 2-day virtual session because we were in lockdown. It was the Australian Human Resources Institute, and I cannot remember the speaker that said this. I would happily attribute it to, I'm pretty sure it was a male speaker, so that narrows it down, but I can't remember which one. But he said, we are at the point in history of the fastest change that we've ever experienced in human history. And we are at the point in history of the slowest period of change that we will ever experience in the future. And I went, oh, mama, that puts that into context. We have to get ready for change. COVID was a disruption, but that's not the only disruption that we are seeing. Technology has been a disruption for decades. It's now accelerating. McKinsey and Accenture have both said that COVID has brought technology implementation ahead 5 years. So we're seeing that. We're seeing supply chain disruptions, partially as a result of COVID and the border closures, partially as a result of the skills shortage, partially as a result of the labor unrest. So, then you have climate change, you have the social reckoning with Black Lives Matter and the Me Too movement. There is change everywhere. And we not only have to get used to it, we have to understand how to deal with it and how to get ahead of it, how to take our telescope and look out towards the future. And to the point earlier, we need to understand that if we go down a certain path and that path proves to be wrong, we need to pivot. We need to go down a different path. So very incredibly important.
Anneli, from that sort of human perspective, it's often said that humans don't deal with change very well, but quite frankly, we're the most adaptable creatures on the planet in some ways. What's your perspective on our ability to reckon with change as human beings in a workplace?
Well, we do have this competing force in our human existence in terms of what we're motivated towards and what we organize ourselves around in terms of, what we focus on. We love certainty, right? So that's no change. We love certainty. At the same time, we love variety. This is surprise. This is change. And we need both to be a functioning, well-rounded, interested and engaged human being. So we have to be able to handle both of those polarities. But there's something else here when it comes to how the brain handles change. We need to think about how to work with change. Like, Kim, I am frightened by that comment, by that speaker. And not at all surprised. So when I think about that, if this truly is the most amount of change we've had, and yet it's still the slowest we'll ever have, then we need to get good at understanding the nature of change and how it impacts our humanity and how we function in the world. So there's a couple of things to consider. One is the quality of the change. If we have lots of different avenues of change, random change, the brain quickly goes into overwhelm. So it's not necessarily the amount of change, the quality of change, it's the coherence. Does the change make sense? Can we tell a story about all the things that are going on? Can we find ways to chunk the information and connect it easily so we can cope with the amount of change? If I ask you to, remember 20 items off the top of your head, you'll have to work hard to do that. But if I say, remember these 3 broad categories, and then these 3 or so, ideas under those categories, your brain can do that easily. It knows how to make things coherent and chunk ideas together. So we can use those sorts of levers. The other idea here is around the quantity of change. So we know that there is a lot of change happening, and we have to be careful, because as much as we love variety, and we do as a human society like change, we just don't like to be changed. There is a distinction. I'm okay to move house, but don't evict me from my house. They're very different things, just very different things.
Yes.
So this idea of, the quality of the change is that, or the quantity of the change is that we have to have capacity. There's a real issue right now with cognitive load. So I only have a certain amount of space in the tank, and I cannot deal with any more than I have space for. So I have to get really good at either chunking the ideas to coherency to a level that I can cope with, or I need to be really good at prioritizing and deprioritizing, because I cannot do all of it. And I don't want to kid myself that I will be able to. So take care of your brain's cognitive load capacity and really work within what's realistic as humans. To ask anything else is just ridiculous.
And
When I
Gena, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say that one of the things that I have been really exploring recently, and again, thank goodness for a conversation like this, because I have no answers and I'm not predicting, because that would be foolhardy. Given what we said at the beginning of this conversation, is that the thing that we have in common, I think, as humans, is that we recognize that we are at this point in time where there's this schism, this seismic shift. The plates might be moving, the tectonic plates are moving in different directions. Whatever it is as almost as if every human who is on the planet at this moment is feeling that. And the forces that we identify, such as, the pandemic or climate change and so on, are really our effort to try to put some meaning to what it is that's happening. And so we classify everything into those chunks, and they make sense. But what is also happening is that humans are changing. And that's the piece of this whole conversation from a human perspective in the workplace that intrigues me the most. My daughter was telling me the other day, or pointed me to an article about the fact that our physical bodies are changing, right? So in her example, she was talking about the thumb, and how, because we're using that as a tool so much in working with our iPhones and so on, that the thumb itself is actually changing. And so this notion that we are in a period of great change, I agree with it, but I'm also really intrigued by the notion that we really don't know, because there have been other periods of time in history when there have been these dramatic changes. We just don't know what they are or what they were. We don't have all the details about them. And we know that we're experiencing technology change and climate change. We know that we're experiencing those things. But humans are changing. And what's really intriguing within organizations, which is where I live, is that it seems that the folk at the top of the pyramid, who have traditionally not only had the power, but who have determined the vision and the direction and said, follow me, and whom we have followed, they seem to be having more, it seems to be the bottom of the pyramid, the humans at the bottom of the pyramid that seem to have this almost organic understanding that something is different. And might not even be able to articulate it. So when I think about change and I think about organizations, I do think about pace of change. I do think of quantity and quality of change. I do think about, pace of change and the possibility that change could be coming at an even faster pace. But what I also sense is that humans are fighting that very thing and are saying, if we do that, which maybe technology might be guiding us to do, which is to just go faster and blah, blah, blah. We can't handle that. We want to slow it down, and we want that's why I'm hearing more conversations about artisanship, about people want natural things, about people saying, I don't have to have the new car, the fastest car. Do I really need the big house? What about a tiny house? I think all of those manifestations, which are contrary to everything that we've been working for in the last 50 years after the war, it's almost like saying, no, there's a limit. And we almost instinctively know that.
Well, it's interesting. Marcus Buckingham, who now many of the people on listening to this would know Marcus Buckingham. He started with the Gallup organization. He was one of the first researchers in strengths. He's now joined ADP as their chief research officer or something like that. Marcus, I'm sorry if I get your title wrong, but he he did some research last September on change and resilience, and what he found was it stopped me in my tracks. He said, "We say people loathe change. They don't loathe change. To Anneli's point, we crave change. We crave variety. What they loathe is uncertainty. So business leaders." It's incumbent upon business leaders, and these are Marcus's words, not mine. It's incumbent upon business leaders as they lead their organizations through change to first tell them what's not going to change, what's going to stay the same, what can you hold on to? And then secondly, what is changing and how it's changing as we know it, and to give them updates as they go through. And now I'm checking out my thumbs.
I certainly can't keep up with a millennial when it comes to using my thumbs on my phone. That's for sure. One of the interesting things about Marcus's research was exactly what you're saying, is that it's incumbent upon leaders to manage the uncertainty around change. And what his research, both on resilience and on engagement, has found is that one of the key factors is trust. Is building trust within your organization, within your teams, your workplace, whatever, depending on where you sit at the leadership level. And I think one of the big shifts in the workplace that's going to need to happen to be able to build that trust, so that you get that engagement, that you're able to be resilient in the times that you need to bounce back or bounce up, to use, I think, his words in the definition, is you need to start involving people more. And you need to say, okay, these are the things that are going on. And these things, don't worry about them. This is what's important. And now I don't know everything about this. Help me to help you deal with those things. And that starts to relieve some of that uncertainty, because people are part of it then. Okay, there's change happening, but I can see what that change is, and I can see what we know and don't know. And then you also have an environment where you can create some experiments. Say, okay, I've got my research team together now. Now let's try these things, and hopefully they move us to where we want to go. And if they don't, we'll go a different way. But if no matter what, we'll gain clarity about what the next steps should be. But lots of noise. But keep the noise aside. Focus here.
And involving them in that conversation is so important, because the research around the Great Resignation is saying that people crave agency and control. Their world is out of control. Some of what they can control is where they work. But if you involve them in projects and involve them in helping to drive the ship, that gives them control as well. That gives them ownership. So really, really important point, Jeff.
So it starts to get at that. The thing that you were talking about, Gena, is people are changing, and their expectations around that agency. It usually manifests itself as control, but at least that agency. Even if I'm not in control, I want to know that I'm playing in the game, and I'm creating change. I'm not being changed. To take your point, Anneli. And then you start to get move a number of these pieces in the same direction.
Yeah, I was just going to make one quick comment, which is I've been sort of keeping track, but not really, kind of loosely noticing the data that comes out in the news periodically about the number of the rate of unemployment and jobs that are available that aren't being filled, and where's the labor force, and did people stop working because they were getting benefits from the government? That whole conversation, that whole macroeconomic conversation is fascinating. And it also is a little bit disconnected from the reality, is that there are people today who are choosing how they want to work already. It's today, right? And one of the photographs in a recent Wall Street Journal article that I read was a photograph of a woman who had left a demanding corporate job and was now teaching, let's say, geography in a middle school. I don't remember. But the point of it, this article, was this whole idea that people are already making these choices. And so, you know, the changes that have to do with what is work and who do I want to be in this world and how do I want to spend my time and what will satisfy me and so on. I think people are getting clarity about that. Where I see that disconnection that relates to what you were saying is that organizational leaders aren't fully grasping. They're not fully grasping this idea that it isn't just about the paycheck. It isn't just about the title. It isn't just about the fancy or whatever thing that you usually offer that was going to be satisfying. It's about what I want. And so when leaders are focusing currently still on these large macro, and they must focus on these large macroeconomic issues, you know, that are necessary, or, you know, they need to understand how those impact their business. They also need to maybe expand the proportion of the amount of weight that they're giving to these human factors. That's where I'm seeing that they're more focused on managing those, those elements that are the traditional drivers of profit that they think about. And then there's this human thing that it's almost as if the human thing is growing in terms of its weight, but that the leaders are still not seeing that. It's really interesting. And that's a sea change, I think, in how leaders are going to have to figure out what really matters and what really drives not just shareholder value, of course, but stakeholder value.
Absolutely. You know, it's quite interesting, and you guys may know this research, but Teresa Mobley has done research on what motivates people in the workforce. And she's got 5 factors, basically reward, pay, recognition, promotion, clear direction, and progress. And what she actually found was, of those 5 factors, the number one factor was progress. Not just any progress, but meaningful progress. If people feel like they're making meaningful progress at work, then that's a greater motivating force than any of the other 5. But then when she went and asked that same question of leaders of businesses, what do you think the order of this is? They rated that dead last and put reward as the number one motivating factor. And what's most interesting about that, besides the disconnect that you point out, Gena, is that progress is intrinsic motivation. It's something that people can make for themselves. And because it's intrinsic motivation, it has this sort of upward spiral effect. They make progress, they want to make more progress. Whereas reward is external or extrinsic, if you want to use that word, motivation. And so you kind of have to keep feeding that machine. And so many of our leaders are dealing with a 20th century mindset on how you lead organizations, command and control, thinkers and doers. And it's, I think when that shift starts to happen, that leaders start to say, well, hold on a second, maybe this isn't me being at the top of the pyramid and the doers are at the bottom. Maybe it's me being in the center of the circle and the people that actually add value to my organization surround me.
PwC did some research called What Workers Want. And this is PwC Australia, I believe. They may have done this globally, but I was privy to the Australian research that showed the disconnect between what workers said that they want and what leaders said that the workers want. They are polar extremes. Here's something interesting, though. So the career progress has been the number one sought after engagement factor globally for years and years and years and years. However, we are at a point in time where one of the studies, and again, they're wildly disparate in terms of what they actually say, but one of the studies said that globally, praise and appreciation is number one, progress is number two. But another study said that, an Australian study said that 52% of workers would choose a learning culture over a fun culture. A learning culture over a fun culture, 52% of Australians.
And the very interesting thing, I wanted to follow up on exactly that Jeff mentioned the word progress and the research from Harvard, but because it is the very definition of what progress is that is changing. And that kind of research is going to have to be redone as we sort of figure out what this new reality is, because progress is no longer just the promotion, the fancy title, or the pay increase. It might not even have anything to do with my job at all. It might have something to do with the organization, but it might have something to do with the relationships that I'm building beyond my immediate work team or my immediate business unit. It might have something to do with my broader career aspirations, but it might even have anything to do with my job. It might have to do with the fact that I have always wanted to be able to do this particular thing in my community, and I see this chance, I'm going to go for it. The job is going to provide me with the money to make a living so that I can buy food and take care of my family. The other thing is going to provide the progress that is meaningful to me. I think what I'm saying here is that these are like fundamental fundamental ways that fundamental currencies of organizational life, that some are now being undervalued relative to how they were valued in the past. And again, it is employees who are changing this currency equation, right? Who are saying it's this other stuff that really matters more. It's really, really fascinating if I work at McDonald's and I wake up one day and I figure out, oh, I can make some decisions for myself. I can make some trade-offs and what have you. And that's exactly what we're seeing. So I keep bringing this back to what we said at the beginning, which I think is our most profound observation. So, which is we don't know what we don't know, but we do know that we have no reason to think that we know everything that we need to know to be able to predict, what that future will look like.
Mike, we are starting to run short on time. We've made it through 2 questions. Hopefully we covered off a few by accident. Another question for us, my friend?
We have a viewer question from Tlaloc Lopez Waterman from Astoria, New York. He asks, what practices do you employ to ensure that you're not stopping at the surface and continue to change and adapt meaningfully without leaving people behind?
We have any takers on this one?
Yeah, I'll have a crack at this.
Go, Anneli. Go.
So I'm pointing at the screen. I knew I was going to do it.
I'm just waiting for someone to say, you're on mute, Anneli, you're on mute. So it hasn't happened yet. It's all good. So practices you employ to ensure that you're not stopping at the surface and continue the change and adapt meaningfully and not leaving people behind. For me, this is the essence of large-scale change, and that is, change has to happen, small touch points over time. You don't go to the gym once. I mean, I don't know. Has anyone gone to the gym once and like, that was an awesome workout. Look at my muscles. You just don't do it. The body doesn't work that way, right? We need continued attention, focused attention on deliberate change over small period, over time. And so if you're wanting to change a culture, you need lots of touch points. If you're wanting to change behavior, you need lots of touch points. And so, if we're looking at a basic change program in an organization, or even just trying to get skills into an organization, the worst thing you can do, which unfortunately a lot of organizations do for budget, time constraints, blah, is they send them to a one-off. It's just a one-off conversation. It's a one-off training. And now we've ticked the box. And the measurement is how many heads attended. Okay, so, 40% of our workforce are done. And I'm thinking, no, they're not done. They've got information, but they don't have integration. So awareness is not the same as application. So at what point are we entering these conversations or these strategies with a strategic mindset? And that is a long-term, comprehensive, blended learning, if you like, in terms of training programs, a blended learning solution, i.e. multiple touch points over a long period of time to allow the brain, the system, the culture to make those changes, just like Gena was talking about with the thumbs. The thumbs didn't change because we touched one iPhone screen. They changed because 1-year-olds and 2-year-olds are fixing your phones. And why are they doing it? Because now they're like this and they've got these, I don't know what kind of thumbs they're getting. I really am curious about that, Gena. What are these thumbs doing? But it didn't happen by touching the phone once, and neither does sustainable change that brings people with us.
Yeah. And I think there's something to be said for the co-creation of those practices over time, so that they're not, it's not simply, boom, here's our new practices that are going to make us more inclusive, or going to make us more resilient. Here are our innovative practices. It's, okay, what are the things that will allow us to start to make that shift, and strategically, where do we want that shift to take us?
And one of the things that's really interesting about that question is that traditionally, when we talk about change, we're talking about something where it tends to be, defined at the top of the organization by the powers that be, and sort of then, cascaded to the rest of the organization. I think that's sort of a traditional way, and we like that because it suggests, consistency and structure and process and manageability and all the things that we in organizational life have come accustomed to, and we like it that way, and leaders in particular like it that way. But at this moment, one of the other possibilities is that leaders will need to be looking to new places to find solutions about what should be implemented as change in terms of managing change or implementing change. And while we've always talked to employees via surveys and other focus groups and those kinds of things, kind of, at certain points in time, and we like to say that we know what employees are experiencing, in order to accomplish what your viewer has asked about here, I think requires a kind of communication, connection, listening, two-way dialogue with employees that does not currently exist. And that will be the challenge, because the only way that you could accomplish an outcome like the one that is being asked about here is if you're really, really clear about what the current state is about whatever the issue is, and also what it is that employees perceive ought to change about it, not just for their own day-to-day employee experience, but from their perceptions of the customer experience, their perceptions of the supply chain, or wherever they're touching this business in the organization. And we don't do that today, right? So in order for us to have sustained change, meaningful change is sustainable and doesn't leave certain people behind, or some other implications of the question, I think we're going to have to redefine, how do we decide what are the priorities for change? Who decides that? What role will employees be playing in this that's different than the role they played before? And then as we try to implement whatever those changes will be, who are we partnering with within the organization to make this happen? Change management professionals, people who come out of learning and development, who have traditionally owned all of that process stuff, can still own all of that process stuff. But the problem has always been that employees go, who came up with that? Why are you doing it that way? Never. I've never worked in an organization where a person, by virtue of having a PMP or being a project management professional or whatever fancy accreditation, has been successful to the point where employees go, oh yeah, I would do it that way. It isn't. It's always the opposite. So even the fundamental idea of what should the change be, I think it's going to have to be reconsidered, revisited. That's sort of one of the fundamental things that I am experiencing in talking to employees about these kinds of issues.
Yeah, the voice of the people. The voice of the people is the way of the new workforce, because they have got to have ownership. They have got to drive it. And the big paradigm shift for managers is taking the time. And that is always the pushback that I get when I say, fixing your employee engagement problems is easy. Talk to your staff. Oh, I don't have time. But you have time to interview when they walk out the door. The voice of the people, we have to pay attention to what they need, and we have to deliver on those expectations or manage them appropriately when we can't.
Yeah. One of the things, Kim, that in the strategic development work that I do, development and execution work that I do, is try to encourage leaders to say strategy really is effective when it reflects what your people need, because they're delivering value for your organization. But also, they're in the best place to actually create that change. Your job as a leader is to support and enable them. So there, too often I think, even when we talk voice of the people, I go out and I hear their voice, I bring it back, and we process it in our insular little bubble, and then give it back to them. They say, well, hold on a second, that's not what we said at all.
Right.
That's not what we meant. So there's an opportunity, I think, to engage people by giving them their own change to be engaged in. And there's no more powerful place to be engaged than, hey, change the place that you work. And not all in one sweeping motion, as you say, Anneli, but here, I'm going to give you the mandate, if you will, and the support to change the place that you actually work and how you interact as people and teams.
I would make one prediction. I would go ahead and make one prediction, and that is that the labor movement, what we call the United States anyway, the labor movement, is going to continue to have increased power. And then the work council concept that you have in Europe that is so powerful, particularly in Germany. I think that we're going to be seeing more of that kind of corporate governance by employees within American corporations. And I think we'll be seeing more employee representatives on corporate boards. These are three examples of specific things that I predict. I'm making predictions in the sense of I'm being a little facetious, but I'm also hedging my bets, because frankly, I'm already seeing this. Those are examples of shifts that won't just be shifts about power, but it will be shifts and influence. It'll be shifts about strategy. What should be changed? And why do you think we should change it? And not filtered by, as Jeff is saying, not filtered.
Yeah. So I can't help but notice we're coming to the end of our hour. Well, we have come to the end of our hour. Gosh, this could be a really long conversation. It's fabulous, actually. So I think we should probably start wrapping up. Mike, any final thoughts, words you want to share with us before we?
Sure. There was so much we had slated to talk about today, and in our preparing the rundown for this, we said this is, and to use a Jeff, it could explode like he did his own, and it has around some core questions which I think are going to take some pondering. I'm certainly going to listen back without my production ears on and just try and absorb some of what's been said here today. So thank you to all the panelists.
Cool. Kim, any final thoughts you'd like to leave us with?
No, I think that it is, you could choose to look at the future of work as either a scary, daunting challenge, or you could choose to look at it as a tremendously exciting opportunity. I know where I fall on that spectrum. I know where everybody on this session falls on that spectrum. And I just would love the listeners to identify where they sit. And, change is inevitable. So what do you need to do to be more excited than scared about it?
Cool. Gena, what do you think? Have we accurately figured out what the future of work will look like?
We figured it out. We have the answer, but I certainly agree with what Kim said. And I think it relates to a fundamental idea that I have been sharing with leaders for always, but particularly in this last, year and a half to 2 years, which is that, effective managers, effective leaders, for employees aren't the people who say what job I'm going to do, what pay I'm going to get, when I'm going to get a promotion, and all of that. Okay, so there are some aspects of that you have to do. It's really helping individual employees to have that confidence in their particular place on this planet, so that when they show up for work, they know what it is they need, and the organization can help them to get it. So I say to employees who might not be leaders something slightly different than I say to leaders. What I say the future is for employees is self-determination in all facets of that. And I like to put that out there as an encouragement to employees, but I also like to put it out there as an education to leaders and managers. That's really what you ought to be doing more of if you haven't been doing that in the past, helping your employees to reach that self-determination in their lives, not just in their work or tasks.
And to add to that, actually, to build on that, I would suggest that as a society, we are becoming better at finding our voice and stepping into our own agency. We're seeing movements, we're seeing Black Lives Matters, we're seeing the Me Too movement. So people are getting used to finding their voice and asking for what they want. So from an employer perspective, the answers are probably right in front of you. I really don't think you need to look too hard or do too much research. You just need to lean in and open those ears and pay attention to what is already underway, and then get out of the way.
Well, that's and look, I'll add to that just as my closing remarks. I think there is getting out of the way, but as leaders, we need leaders. So and leaders at all different levels in the organization there, but leadership is more about supporting and enabling the things that actually make you better as an organization. And as we've just discussed for the last hour, a lot of that has to do with ensuring that people feel that they're getting better as human beings, and that they're able to utilize their agency, that they're able to bring their best selves to their work, but also to the rest of their lives. Because I think work-life balance has probably long been a fallacy, but it's really all about life balance. And where does work fit into my life, and how does it support all of the things that I want to be able to do? And I think that's probably one of the more crucial things about what the workplace is going to require. The workplace of the future is going to require of organizations, of leaders, and in some ways of society, is, how do we actually allow people to be more fulfilled in their lives in a positive way by their work, and both in supporting the other things they want to do, but also getting out of the way of those things as well. So with that, we've come slightly beyond the top of our hour. I want to thank all of our panelists. Amazing discussion, actually. I really do appreciate it. And I really look forward to the conversations that will follow on from this one as we start to dive deeper into some of these issues and get really focused on, maybe not granular, because it's inherently a very large conversation about something we don't, as we've said, don't know a lot about, but start to focus in on psychological safety. What is culture, and how do we build it? What are the different lenses that human beings see their work through? So thank you very, very much to everyone on the panel, and thank you very much for all of those that have joined us. And good day. Goodbye from the Difference
Thank
Project.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, everyone.
Cool.
We're done?
We're done.
We are done.
Everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. That was great.
Of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 12, 15 questions that we had on the deck there, that was awesome though. Jeff, we literally did say, didn't we, that we can ask one question and go for an hour here. So and it was nice to actually that in fact you answered many of those questions along the way. So thank you so much, panelists. I learned a lot today.
Cool.
Thank you for the
was fun.
invitation. It was good. Did we lose Gena?
Yeah.
What happened? Did she drop off? Or
She went away. Did you?
She went away.
She went away.
Where did she go?
Mic drop.
It's not that late. It's not that late for her anymore.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Brilliant.
She may very well have had other plans for the evening. So yes, thank you very much. I really appreciate it, guys. I thought that was a great conversation.
Yeah.
So
we don't have anybody who's waited around at the end to chat today, so that's all cool. It's out on the YouTube. Go Jeff.
Yeah, I just have, if you have 2 minutes, anything we could do better, different, need to keep doing next time from your perspective as panelists. We have
I would say,
want to get better.
Mike, you're looking fabulous. Dead center. You didn't touch your face once. It is open and it is present and it is engaging. Mwah, my friend, you look professional and awesome. Well done, you. Really good. And Jeff, no rapping.
I was waiting
is
for
that
the
what
butt.
we need?
There's no butt.
Is it right? There's no butt. No butt, my friend. You're all good.
No,
Beautiful.
We would have had rapping had my audio not.
Oh, I knew that's what it was.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
You missed out on
it. Interestingly enough, Kim, you raised Marcus Buckingham. It's actually a spoken word piece, but it's actually done to a remix of Hamilton.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it's around resilience, and it was specifically inspired by his research. That ADP
wow!
did
Oh, isn't that
resilience.
funny? Isn't that funny? Yeah.
We didn't even hit the R word today, Jeff.
Yeah. No. We
Resilience.
didn't.
Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent.
So, Kim, any words of wisdom, insights, things from your perspective?
No, I thought it went well. Yeah, no, the conversation flowed. Hopefully I didn't hog it too much.